My name is Magnus, and at 35 years old I thought I had moved past the worst betrayal of my life. After building a successful IT consulting career in Seattle, I never expected to face my hometown ghosts again. But when your own mother falsely accuses you of stealing from a church charity to protect your brother, then has the audacity to ask for $50,000 years later without even an apology, you learn that family wounds cut the portingay deepest. Before I dive into how my own mother destroyed my reputation and then had the nerve to ask me for $50,000, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever been wrongfully accused. I grew up in Pine Creek, Minnesota, one of those small towns where everyone knows your business before you do. Our population barely reached 3,000, with the church serving as both spiritual center and social hub. My mother, Martha, was what locals called a pillar of the community, Sunday school teacher, charity organizer, and unofficial town gossip collector. My father, Bill, was the quiet counterbalance, a hard-working electrician who spoke through actions rather than words. He would fix the church wiring for free and shovel elderly neighbors' driveways without being asked, but rarely expressed emotions or took sides in family disputes. Then there was my brother Tyler, 3 years younger, and somehow always the center of attention. While I was the responsible one with straight A's and practical ambitions, Tyler was the charismatic troublemaker everyone adored. He had this magnetic personality that drew people in despite his flaws. When we were kids, I would get grounded for leaving my bike in the driveway, while Tyler would somehow charm his way out of punishment after breaking our neighbor's window with a baseball. He is just expressing his creativity, my mother would say, or he is still finding his way. Always excuses, always special treatment. Our house followed an unspoken hierarchy. Tyler first, Mom second, Dad somewhere in the middle, and me last. I was the reliable one who needed no attention, or so they assumed. I remember my 10th grade science fair project winning first place in the state competition. My father nodded approvingly when I showed him the trophy, but my mother just asked if I had remembered to pick up Tyler's prescription on the way home. Meanwhile, Tyler's participation award from a local baseball tournament earned a special place in our living room display case. Technology became my escape. While other kids played sports or went to parties, I spent hours in our basement, learning computer programming on an old Dell desktop my uncle had given us. The logic of code made sense to me in a way family dynamics never did. Computers were predictable. Input A always led to output B. No favoritism, no shifting standards. By senior year, I had developed several simple video games and built websites for local businesses. My guidance counselor recognized my potential and pushed me to apply for scholarships. When I received a full ride to the University of Washington's computer science program, my mother's first response was concern about who would help with the church audiovisual system once I left. Tyler had just barely graduated high school and planned to take some time before maybe attending community college. He never did. College was liberating. For the first time, I was judged on my own merits rather than compared to my brother. I thrived academically and socially, making real friends who valued my reliability and technical skills. Seattle's booming tech scene offered plenty of opportunities, and by my junior year, I had secured a paid internship at a growing software company. They offered me a full-time position upon graduation, and I happily accepted. Meanwhile, back home, Tyler bounced between jobs: retail clerk, restaurant server, landscaping assistant, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. My parents subsidized his rent for a small apartment in town and regularly covered his temporary financial shortfalls. During our occasional phone calls, my mother would invariably steer the conversation toward Tyler's latest venture and potential, despite these ventures never materializing into stability. I visited home sparingly during college and early career years, major holidays and the occasional family event. Each visit followed the same pattern: initial warmth, followed by subtle comparisons and expectations to help Tyler in some way. "Your brother really admires your computer skills," my mother would say. "Maybe you could teach him programming so he could get a good job like yours." Never mind that Tyler had shown zero interest or aptitude for technology. After graduation, I quickly rose through the ranks at my company, eventually leading a team developing business intelligence software. By my late 20s, I had saved enough for a comfortable condo overlooking Lake Union and had established myself as a respected consultant in the industry. My life in Seattle was fulfilling and drama-free until that fateful Christmas visit 8 years ago. December 8th marks the date I flew back to Minnesota, planning to stay through the 27th for an extended Christmas visit. It had been almost 18 months since my last trip home, and I felt a mixture of obligation and genuine desire to reconnect with family and childhood friends. At 35, I had recently completed a major project and needed the break before starting with a new client in January. Pine Creek looked like a holiday postcard when I arrived, fresh snow blanketing the ground wreaths on every door, and the town square Christmas tree twinkling with thousands of multicolored lights. My father picked me up from the Minneapolis airport, and we spent the 2-hour drive catching up on neutral topics: Seattle weather, his recent fishing trips, and the Vikings' disappointing season. "Your mother is pretty wrapped up in the church Christmas charity drive this year," he mentioned as we neared Pine Creek. "She is hoping you will help out while you are home. The computer system they use for tracking donations is giving them trouble." The annual Christmas charity drive was my mother's pride and joy, a month-long campaign to raise money for struggling families in our community. Each year, the church aimed to provide Christmas meals, winter clothing, and gifts for children whose parents could not afford them. This year, they had set an ambitious goal of $10,000, nearly double their usual target. "Of course I will help," I replied. Fixing their donation tracking system would be simple enough and would give me something productive to do during the visit. The next morning, my mother wasted no time putting me to work. After a hurried breakfast, she drove us to the First Community Church, a white clapboard building with a tall steeple that had stood in the center of town for over a century. Inside, the fellowship hall had been transformed into charity drive headquarters with volunteers sorting donated toys, folding clothes, and preparing food baskets. "Magnus is here to fix our computer problems," my mother announced to the room. Several church members I had known my entire life came over to greet me with varying degrees of warmth. Pastor Griffin, a kind man in his 60s, who had baptized me as an infant, gave me a genuine welcome. "Your mother tells us you are some kind of computer genius now," he said with a smile. "We sure could use your help with our donation spreadsheets. Mrs. Henderson keeps accidentally deleting rows." Mrs. Henderson. The elderly church secretary looked embarrassed. "Technology and I have never seen eye to eye," she admitted, showing me to a dated desktop computer in the church office. I spent that first day updating their tracking system, creating a simpler interface that would prevent accidental deletions and automatically calculate totals. I also showed Mrs. Henderson basic spreadsheet functions and left written instructions for future reference. By late afternoon, they had a functional system that even the most technologically challenged volunteer could navigate. "This is wonderful," Pastor Griffin said when I demonstrated the updated system. "Now we can focus on reaching our goal instead of fighting with the computer." Throughout that day, and the next few, I noticed Tyler was conspicuously absent from the volunteer roster, despite my mother frequently mentioning his commitment to the church. When he finally appeared at a collection event 3 days into my visit, something seemed off about his behavior. He arrived in a new North Face jacket I knew he could not afford on his sporadic income from bartending at the local tavern. When Mrs. Palmer, one of the wealthier church members, handed him a check for $500, I noticed how quickly he stuffed it into the donation envelope without recording it in the system I had created. "Tyler, you need to log that donation," I reminded him. "Right, sorry," he muttered, looking annoyed as he reluctantly entered the information. Later that evening, I saw him at the town's only decent restaurant buying rounds of drinks for friends. When I asked him about it at home, he shrugged it off. "Just picked up some contracting work, helping Bradley Harris renovate his basement," he explained vaguely. "Figured I deserved to celebrate a little." I knew Bradley Harris, and he was not the type to pay generously for unskilled labor, especially not enough for expensive jackets and nights out. Something did not add up, but I dismissed my suspicions. Tyler had always found ways to live beyond his means, usually through our parents' generosity. The charity drive intensified as Christmas approached. Cash donations flowed in alongside checks, gift cards, and physical items. The money was counted each evening by 2 volunteers for accountability recorded in my tracking system, and stored in a lockbox in Pastor Griffin's office until the daily bank deposit. I volunteered for counting duty several times, paired with different church members, including my mother and Mrs. Henderson. On December 21st, just 4 days before Christmas, I was helping Pastor Griffin and my mother count the day's substantial donations when we made a disturbing discovery. According to my tracking system, we should have had approximately $4,200 in the lockbox awaiting deposit. Instead, we counted only $3,400. That cannot be right, my mother said, recounting the stacks of bills. We must have made a recording error. I double-checked the system, reviewing each entry. Everything is logged correctly, I confirmed. There should be $800 more than what we are seeing. Pastor Griffin looked troubled. Let us check the office for any envelopes we might have missed, he suggested, but a thorough search revealed nothing. I do not want to jump to conclusions, he said finally, but it appears some money has gone missing. We should keep this quiet for now while we investigate. The last thing we need is to cause panic among the congregation. My mother nodded in agreement, though I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she locked the remaining cash away. Perhaps it was just a mistake at the bank from yesterday's deposit, she suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. That evening at home, an uncomfortable tension hung over dinner. My father, sensing something was wrong, asked about the charity drive's progress. We had a small discrepancy in the counts today, my mother said carefully. Pastor Griffin is looking into it. Tyler, who had arrived late and missed most of the meal, perked up at this. What kind of discrepancy? He asked, an edge to his voice. Just some confusion with the numbers, my mother replied quickly. Nothing to worry about. But the way she avoided eye contact with everyone at the table told me she was more concerned than she wanted to admit. And the way Tyler immediately relaxed and changed the subject made me wonder if my earlier suspicions had merit after all. 3 days before Christmas, I received a text from Pastor Griffin asking me to come to the church for an emergency meeting regarding the charity drive. I assumed they wanted my help tracking down the accounting error, or perhaps improving the security of the donation storage. What I walked into instead would forever change my relationship with my family and community. The pastor's study was somber when I arrived. Pastor Griffin sat behind his desk looking grave. My parents occupied 2 chairs to his right, my father staring at the floor, my mother clutching a tissue with reddened eyes. 3 church elders I had known since childhood sat along the wall, their expressions a mix of disappointment and judgment. The only person conspicuously absent was Tyler. Please sit down, Magnus, Pastor Griffin said, gesturing to the lone empty chair facing his desk. The arrangement felt unsettlingly like a tribunal with me in the defendant's seat. What is going on? I asked, glancing between their serious faces. Pastor Griffin cleared his throat. We have been investigating the missing funds from the charity drive, he began. $800 is a significant amount that would have provided Christmas for several families in need. I nodded in agreement. Have you figured out what happened to it? The room fell silent until my mother spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I found something in your room this morning. The statement hit me like a physical blow. My room. What were you doing in my room? She could not meet my eyes. I was putting away your laundry and I found evidence. Evidence of what I demanded, though a sickening realization was already forming. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. $300 in cash hidden in your suitcase, she said, placing it on the pastor's desk, and a receipt for a new watch purchased yesterday. I stared at the envelope in disbelief. That is my money that I brought from Seattle for Christmas gifts. The watch was for Dad. I turned to my father, who still would not look at me. Dad, you cannot seriously believe I would steal from the church. Pastor Griffin intervened. Magnus, your mother also mentioned seeing you near the office alone on Tuesday evening when everyone else was at the choir rehearsal. I was fixing the printer driver. Mrs. Henderson asked me to look at it because it was not connecting properly. I turned to my mother in disbelief. You know that. You saw me working on it. My mother finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. I want to believe you, Magnus. But the evidence, and you have been acting strangely this visit, asking questions about the donation handling. I was trying to help secure the system, I protested, my voice rising with frustration. This is insane. I have my own money. Why would I steal from a charity? Elder Thompson, a stern man who had never particularly liked me, spoke up. Pride comes before a fall, young man. Sometimes even good people give in to temptation. I could not believe what was happening. Where is Tyler? I demanded. Has anyone checked his new jacket or asked how he is suddenly buying drinks for everyone in town? My mother's face hardened. Do not try to shift blame to your brother. Tyler has been dedicated to this church while you have been away building your fancy career. He would never do something like this. Pastor Griffin sighed heavily. Magnus, if you confess and return the remaining $500, we can handle this privately as a church family. No police involvement, no public shame. We all stumble sometimes. I stood up shaking with anger and hurt. I have nothing to confess because I did not take anything. That $300 is mine earned honestly. I cannot believe my own family would accuse me without a shred of real evidence. My father finally spoke, his voice strained. Son, just tell the truth. Things will go easier. That was the moment I realized I was completely alone. My own father, the man who had taught me about integrity and standing up for what was right, had already convicted me without even hearing my side. The truth is that I did not take that money, I said quietly. And the fact that none of you believe me tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in this family. My mother began sobbing louder. Magnus, please, just return the money and we can move past this. Think about the families who will go without because of this. Her emotional manipulation was the final straw. I cannot return what I never took, I said, moving toward the door. Have you even considered that I might be innocent, that someone else might have taken it? Who else had access to the office? Elder Thompson asked skeptically. Everyone, I exclaimed. The door is never locked during the day. Any volunteer could have gone in there, including Tyler, who somehow has money for a new jacket and nights out despite being between jobs again. My mother stood up, her expression shifting from sorrow to anger. That is enough. I will not have you slandering your brother to protect yourself. Perhaps. She hesitated, then continued in a quieter voice. Perhaps it would be best if you returned to Seattle early. This community needs to heal and your presence is making things difficult. I looked around the room at these people who had known me my entire life, who had watched me grow up, attend Sunday school, volunteer countless hours, and saw nothing but judgment and condemnation. Not one person was willing to consider my innocence. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. I will be gone tomorrow, but know this, I did not take that money, and someday you will realize what a terrible mistake you have made today. I walked out of the church into the bitter Minnesota winter, the cold air nothing compared to the chill I felt inside. My own mother had just chosen to believe the worst about me rather than question her golden child. She had planted evidence in my room and twisted my actions to fit her narrative. And now I was being cast out, labeled a thief, all to protect Tyler from suspicion. As I trudged through the snow back to my parents' house, I realized something fundamental had broken inside me. The belief that family would always have my back, that blood meant loyalty. That illusion was now shattered beyond repair. The speed at which news travels in a small town never ceases to amaze me. By the time I reached my parents' house from the church, my phone was already buzzing with texts from childhood friends and acquaintances. Some were accusatory, others expressed disappointment, and a few simply unfriended me on social media without comment. Somehow, despite Pastor Griffin's assurance of handling the matter privately, the entire town seemed to know that Magnus Anderson had stolen from the church charity drive. I packed my belongings in a numb haze, booking the first available flight back to Seattle for the following morning. When I went downstairs, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table, red-eyed but resolute. I have always tried to raise you to do the right thing, she said, not looking at me. There is still time to make this right, Magnus. I cannot confess to something I did not do. I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. And I cannot believe you would think so little of me. She shook her head sadly. Your pride always was your downfall. My father came home from work and retreated to the garage without speaking to me. Only Tyler seemed unchanged, arriving home late and greeting me with his usual casual, "Hey bro," as if nothing had happened. I cornered him in the kitchen when no one else was around. "I know it was you," I said quietly. "What did you do with the money, Tyler?" He maintained eye contact, but I noticed his right hand twitching slightly, his tell since childhood when he was lying. "I have no idea what you are talking about. But it sounds like you have got yourself in some trouble." "They are blaming me for money that went missing from the charity drive," I said. "Money that disappeared right around the time you started flashing cash around town. That is not a coincidence." Tyler shrugged, reaching for an apple from the fruit bowl. "Sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. Maybe you should not have taken the money if you did not want to get caught." The casual cruelty of his response left me speechless. This was my brother, my own blood, perfectly content to let me take the fall for his actions. And worse, my parents were enabling it, choosing to believe the worst about me, rather than question their favorite son. That evening we had a previously scheduled dinner with my grandparents, aunt, uncle, and cousins, our traditional Christmas Eve family gathering. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a warm, festive occasion. Instead, it became an exercise in barely concealed tension and judgment. My grandmother, usually my biggest supporter, could barely look at me. My Uncle Robert made a pointed comment about integrity being more important than success. My young cousins, picking up on the adults' behavior, whispered behind their hands when I entered the room. Only my grandfather, a man of few words but sound judgment, seemed to reserve his opinion, watching the family dynamics with thoughtful eyes. Midway through dinner, my Aunt Barbara asked about the charity drive's progress. "We have had a small setback," my mother replied carefully, "but we are still hoping to reach our goal." "I heard about what happened," my aunt persisted, glancing at me. "Such a shame. Those poor families." I set down my fork, appetite gone. "I did not take the money," I said clearly, addressing the entire table. "I know everyone has already decided I am guilty, but I am telling you I did not do it." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table until my mother spoke. "Magnus, please, let us just have a nice family dinner." The hypocrisy was too much. A nice family dinner where everyone treats me like a criminal, where my own parents believe I would steal from needy children at Christmas. That ship has sailed, Mom. I stood up from the table. "Thank you for dinner. I will be leaving first thing tomorrow morning, so I should go finish packing." My grandfather followed me out to the hallway. "Magnus," he said quietly, "in my experience, the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Stay strong, boy." That small gesture of potential faith meant more than he could know, but it was too little against the wave of condemnation from everyone else. The next morning, my father drove me to the Minneapolis airport in silence. As we approached the terminal, he finally spoke. "Your mother is heartbroken over this." I stared out the window at the gray Minnesota landscape. "So am I, Dad. So am I." He pulled up to the departure area and put the car in park. "Safe travels," he said, not meeting my eyes. I grabbed my luggage and stepped out of the car. "Tell Mom I will call when I get home," I said, more out of habit than intention. He nodded once, and then he was gone, driving away from the son he believed was a thief. The flight back to Seattle was the longest 3.5 hours of my life. I replayed every moment of the past week, searching for clues I might have missed, ways I could have prevented this outcome. But the truth was simple and painful. My family had shown me exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of trust and love, and it was at the bottom. Back in Seattle, I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied and declining invitations from friends who wanted to hear about my holiday visit. How could I explain that my own mother had accused me of theft, and my entire hometown now thought I was a criminal? The humiliation and betrayal were too raw, too personal. In the months that followed, my communication with my family dwindled to almost nothing. My mother sent occasional texts about town happenings or Tyler's latest ventures, acting as if our relationship was normal. My father, never much of a phone person, limited himself to brief check-ins about practical matters. Neither ever mentioned the charity money again, as if by ignoring it they could erase what had happened. Through mutual friends, I heard that Tyler continued his pattern of financial instability. He quit his bartending job, tried selling insurance for 2 months, then moved on to working at the local hardware store. Despite his erratic employment, he somehow managed a week-long trip to Cancun that spring and bought a used jet ski that summer. No one seemed to question where the money came from. My own life in Seattle continued to flourish professionally, But the false accusation affected me in ways I had not anticipated. I developed trust issues that sabotaged potential relationships. When a woman I was dating borrowed my laptop without asking, I ended things immediately, the violation triggering memories of my mother going through my belongings to plant evidence. When friends asked for small loans, I became irrationally suspicious of their motives. I found myself building walls, keeping people at a distance to prevent the kind of deep betrayal I had experienced from my family. If the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally could turn on me so completely, how could I trust anyone else? 3 Christmas seasons came and went. I sent gifts to my parents but declined invitations to visit. Pine Creek and its judgmental community had nothing to offer me but painful memories. I had created a new life in Seattle, one built on my own terms where people knew me for who I truly was, rather than through the distorted lens of family dynamics and small-town gossip. But the unresolved injustice continued to fester beneath the surface, a wound that would not fully heal until the truth finally came to light. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday evening in March, nearly 3 years after the incident. I was reviewing code for a client project when my father's name appeared on my phone screen. We spoke maybe once a month at this point, brief conversations about neutral topics that carefully avoided any mention of the charity money or my estrangement from the family. "Magnus," he said when I answered, his voice sounding older and more tired than I remembered. "We need to talk, really talk." Something in his tone made me pay attention. "What is going on, Dad?" He took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, a big one, and I would rather do this in person, but I do not think it can wait until you decide to visit again." My heart began racing. "An apology for what?" "For not believing you," he said simply. "About the church money. You were telling the truth and I should have stood by you." The validation I had craved for 3 years washed over me in a confusing mix of relief, vindication, and renewed anger. "How did you find out?" I asked, my voice tight. "Tyler," he sighed. "He has been struggling with a gambling problem for years, apparently. Online poker, mostly. Things came to a head last month when he took out payday loans to cover some debts and could not repay them. Your mother and I had to bail him out, but I insisted on an intervention with a counselor." I listened in silence as my father continued. During the session, the counselor pushed him to be honest about his history with money. That is when he confessed to taking the charity money 3 years ago. He was desperate after losing a big bet online and saw an opportunity when he was helping count donations. The confirmation of what I had suspected all along should have felt satisfying, but instead it just made me sad. So he finally admitted it. Did he also admit that he let me take the blame, that he watched his brother be ostracized and did nothing? My father was quiet for a moment. "Yes, eventually. But Magnus, there is more, and it is harder to say." "What could be harder than learning your brother stole from a charity and let you take the fall?" I asked. "Finding out your mother knew," he said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean she knew? When did she know?" "Not from the beginning," he clarified quickly. "But she figured it out before you left town. Tyler was acting suspicious, and when she confronted him privately, he partially admitted it, claimed he had just borrowed the money temporarily and would replace it with his next paycheck." I could barely process what I was hearing, and she still let me be blamed. She planted money in my room as evidence against me. She panicked, my father said, not defensively, but as a simple statement of fact. Tyler had been in trouble before. That DUI in his early 20s, the credit card debt she helped him pay off. She was afraid if this came out with money actually missing, there might be legal consequences. The church might press charges. "So she sacrificed me instead," I said bitterly. "She convinced herself you would be fine, that you had your successful career in Seattle and could weather the storm while Tyler's life would be destroyed by a theft charge. It was wrong, terribly wrong, but in her mind she was protecting her child. I am her child too, Dad," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I know, son. I know that now, and I should have known it then. I should have stood up for you, questioned things more, but I was caught up in the shock of it all, and by the time I had my doubts, you were already gone." We were both silent for a long moment, the weight of 3 years of injustice hanging between us. "Tyler wants to talk to you," my father finally said, to apologize himself. "I am not ready for that," I replied honestly. "Maybe someday, but not now." "I understand. But there is one more thing you should know. Pastor Griffin knows the truth now, too. Tyler confessed to him as part of his recovery process. The pastor was devastated about what happened to you. He wants to make a public announcement to the congregation, clear your name." The thought of my vindication being announced to the church that had so quickly condemned me stirred mixed emotions. Part of me wanted that public restoration of my reputation, but another part knew it would change nothing about the fundamental betrayal by my family. "Tell Pastor Griffin I appreciate the gesture, but I do not need a public announcement. My life is in Seattle now. What people in Pine Creek think of me stopped mattering a long time ago." My father sighed. "He feels responsible for not investigating more thoroughly." "We all failed you, Magnus." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did." After that conversation, several church members reached out with private apologies. Mrs. Henderson sent a handwritten letter expressing her remorse for doubting me. The Palmers, whose donation had been among the stolen funds, emailed to say they had always found the accusation against me difficult to believe. Even Elder Thompson called his gruff voice uncharacteristically humble as he asked for forgiveness. I accepted these apologies graciously while maintaining emotional distance. These were people who had known me my entire life, yet had been quick to believe the worst based on flimsy evidence. Their regret seemed genuine, but the ease with which they had discarded our lifelong connections revealed something important about community that I could never unlearn. My relationship with my father slowly began to heal. We spoke more frequently, and our conversations grew deeper and more honest. He made a point of visiting me in Seattle twice that year, making an effort to understand my life and connect with me on my terms. My mother was a different story. When she finally called, her approach was not what I had expected or needed. "Your father says we need to discuss what happened." She began, her voice carrying that familiar tone of someone fulfilling an obligation rather than speaking from the heart. "Yes, we do," I agreed. "I made a mistake, Magnus. I should have investigated more thoroughly before jumping to conclusions." Her careful wording told me everything. This was not an acknowledgement of deliberately framing me to protect Tyler. This was a minor mea culpa about insufficient investigation. "That is not what happened, Mom, and we both know it," I said firmly. "You knew it was Tyler before I left town. You chose to protect him by sacrificing me." "I was trying to protect both my children," she protested. "Tyler would have faced criminal charges. Your reputation might have been damaged, but you had your whole Seattle life to return to." Her justification only deepened the wound. My reputation was not just damaged, Mom. It was destroyed in the community where I grew up. People I had known my entire life looked at me like I was garbage. My own family believed I would steal from charity. And you knew the truth and said nothing. "I made a difficult choice, in an impossible situation," she said defensively. "No, you made the same choice you always made. Tyler first, me second. Or in this case, not even second. Just collateral damage." Our conversation ended without resolution, establishing the pattern that would define our relationship moving forward. Surface-level politeness, masking an unbridged chasm of hurt and betrayal. Unlike my father, my mother never offered a true apology that acknowledged the deliberate nature of her actions. In her mind, she had made a regrettable but understandable choice to protect her more vulnerable child. As for Tyler, I eventually agreed to a phone call 6 months after learning the truth. His apology seemed rehearsed part of a recovery program step, rather than genuine remorse. "I was in a really bad place back then," he explained. "The gambling had taken over my life and I was not thinking clearly. I never meant for you to take the blame." "But you let it happen," I pointed out. "You watched me be accused and said nothing." "I was scared," he admitted. "And then it just spiraled out of control. By the time I realized how serious it was, it seemed too late to come clean. I did not know if I could ever fully forgive Tyler, but I recognized that his addiction had played a role in his actions. We established a cautious, distant relationship connected by blood but separated by experience and trust. The truth had finally come out, but its revelation brought more complexity than closure. The past could not be undone, and the knowledge that my own mother had deliberately sacrificed my reputation to protect her favorite son left a wound that no apology could fully heal. I was vindicated, but not restored. Free from false accusation, but not from the pain of betrayal. 5 years passed after the truth came to light. My relationship with my father had strengthened through honest communication and his consistent efforts to make amends. My mother and I maintained polite but distant contact, speaking on holidays and birthdays without ever addressing the deeper issues between us. Tyler and I exchanged occasional texts, mostly initiated by him, but rarely had meaningful conversations. I had built a fulfilling life in Seattle, eventually starting my own IT consulting firm that specialized in cybersecurity for small businesses. My personal trust issues had improved with therapy, allowing me to develop a small but loyal circle of friends, and even begin a promising relationship with Diane, a graphic designer who worked with some of my clients. It was during a business trip to Minneapolis that the next chapter in this family saga unfolded. I had extended my stay to visit my father, who still lived in Pine Creek, but was considering moving to a smaller home since my mother had passed away 2 years earlier from breast cancer. I had attended the funeral standing stoically among distant relatives and town residents, who now knew the truth about the charity incident, but still treated me with an awkward mix of guilt and lingering suspicion. The evening before I was scheduled to drive out to Pine Creek, I received a text from my brother. "Mom wants to meet you for coffee tomorrow morning before you head to Dad's, the cafe, on Hennepin Ave, at 9 a.m. Important family matter to discuss." The message was confusing on multiple levels. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier, yet Tyler was texting as if she were still alive. I called him immediately. "Tyler, what are you talking about? Mom is gone." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sorry, force of habit," he said, sounding flustered. "I meant I want to meet you, to discuss a family matter. Can you make it?" Something felt off about the request, but curiosity got the better of me. "Fine. 9 a.m. at Hennepin Cafe." The next morning I arrived at the cafe early, selecting a table with a view of the entrance. At precisely 9, Tyler walked in, but he was not alone. Martha Anderson, my mother very much alive, walked beside him. The shock must have been evident on my face as they approached my table. My mother, who I believed had died of breast cancer 2 years earlier, stood before me looking healthy, if somewhat older than when I had last seen her. "Hello, Magnus," she said, sliding into the seat across from me, while Tyler took the chair between us. "Thank you for meeting us." "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, looking between them. "I went to your funeral." My mother had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That was Aunt Martha's funeral. Your father thought it would be easier this way, given our history." "Easier," I repeated incredulously. "You let me believe my mother was dead for 2 years, and you thought that was easier." Tyler jumped in his voice, taking on the smooth, persuasive tone he used when trying to sell something. "It was a misunderstanding, bro. Dad mentioned Aunt Martha passed away from breast cancer, and you assumed it was Mom. No one deliberately deceived you." The calculated manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. My father specifically told me my mother had died. We talked about it multiple times. He would never make up something like that unless... The realization hit me. "Unless you put him up to it," I said, looking directly at my mother. "Why would you do that?" She sipped her coffee before answering. "Things were strained between us, Magnus. You had made it clear you wanted little to do with me after the misunderstanding with the charity money. When Martha passed, it seemed like an opportunity for a clean break." "A clean break," I repeated flatly. "Most people just get divorced or move away. They do not fake their own death to their children." "It was not like that," she insisted. "It just happened, and then it seemed easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe." I stood up ready to walk out, but Tyler grabbed my arm. "Please, Magnus, just hear us out. We have a proposition that could benefit all of us." Against my better judgment, I sat back down. "You have 5 minutes." My mother straightened in her chair, adopting the practical tone she used when discussing church committee business. "Tyler has started a new venture, an organic food delivery service connecting local farmers with health-conscious consumers, Farm Fresh Direct. It is already showing tremendous potential." Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "We have signed up 15 farmers and over 100 subscribers in just 2 months. The growth potential is enormous, especially with millennials willing to pay premium prices for locally sourced products. I looked between them, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It did not take long. "We need an investment to scale the business properly," my mother continued. "Refrigerated vans, a better website with online ordering capabilities, marketing materials. We are looking for $50,000 in exchange for 20% of the company." The audacity was breathtaking. After everything that had happened, the false accusation, the deliberate sacrifice of my reputation, and now this bizarre death deception, they were asking me for money. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You accused me of stealing, destroyed my reputation in my hometown. Let me believe you were dead for 2 years, and now you want me to invest $50,000 in Tyler's latest scheme." "It is not a scheme," Tyler protested. "It is a legitimate business with real customers and revenue. And family helps family," my mother added, as if stating an irrefutable natural law. "This could be a chance for us to move forward, put the past behind us." I studied my mother's face, searching for any sign of self-awareness or recognition of the absurdity of her request. There was none. In her mind, this was a perfectly reasonable proposition. "Have you ever apologized to me?" I asked her quietly. "A real apology, not an explanation or justification for what you did regarding the charity money." She shifted uncomfortably. "I made a mistake in how I handled things. We all did things we regret during that difficult time." "That is not an apology, Mom. Do you even remember what you did? You planted evidence in my room. You told everyone at church I was a thief. You chose to protect Tyler at my expense, knowing he was guilty and I was innocent." "That was a misunderstanding from a long time ago," she said dismissively. "I think it is time we all moved past it." Her response confirmed what I had always suspected but never wanted to believe. My mother felt no genuine remorse for her actions. In her mind, her choices had been justified by her desire to protect Tyler, and my pain was simply collateral damage. I stood up again, this time with finality. "I need to think about this," I said, not because I was actually considering their investment proposal, but because I needed space to process the surreal encounter. "That is understandable," my mother nodded, misinterpreting my response as potential interest. "We can send you the business plan and financial projections. The return on investment could be substantial." Tyler pulled out a glossy folder from his messenger bag. "All the details are in here. Take your time, but not too much time. We have other potential investors interested." I took the folder, automatically too stunned by the entire situation to refuse. "I will be in touch," I said vaguely, then turned and walked out of the cafe into the bright Minneapolis morning, my mind reeling from what had just occurred. My mother was alive. She and Tyler had deliberately maintained this deception for 2 years, and now they wanted my money without a hint of genuine remorse for past betrayals. The calculated nature of it all was staggering. As I drove to my father's house in Pine Creek, a new understanding began to form. This was not just about the charity money anymore. This was about a fundamental disconnect in how my mother and brother viewed relationships and responsibility. In their world, past actions had no bearing on present requests. Loyalty was expected but not earned, and family obligation trumped personal accountability every time. The conversation I needed to have with my father had just become much more complicated. The drive to Pine Creek gave me time to process the shocking revelation that my mother was alive and the audacious request for $50,000. By the time I pulled into my father's driveway, my initial shock had transformed into a calm, clear sense of purpose. This unexpected encounter had finally provided what years of distance had not: the opportunity for true closure. My father was waiting on the porch, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw my car. The smile faded quickly when he saw my expression. "You know," he said simply. I nodded, taking a seat beside him on the porch swing that had hung there since my childhood. I just had coffee with a ghost and her loyal sidekick. Quite the family reunion. He sighed heavily, passing a hand over his face. "I never wanted to lie to you, Magnus. After what happened with the charity money, I promised myself I would always be honest with you. But Martha, she has a way of convincing people to do things against their better judgment." "Why did you go along with it?" I asked. not accusatory but genuinely curious. "She left me," he said quietly, "right after Tyler confessed about the charity money, said she could not handle the shame of facing you or the community once the truth came out. She moved to Minneapolis to live with her sister, the real Martha, who did die of breast cancer. When you called asking about your mother, I took the coward's way out. It seemed easier than explaining she had abandoned us. The pieces were falling into place, and now she and Tyler want $50,000 for his organic food delivery business." My father snorted. "Farm Fresh Direct. That business has been struggling since day one. The farmers keep quitting because Tyler pays late and customers are canceling because deliveries are inconsistent. Your mother is trying to save it with an injection of cash." "My cash," I clarified. "Your cash," he agreed, "though I am surprised they asked for only $50,000. Last I heard they were underwater by at least twice that amount." We sat in silence for a moment, the porch swing creaking gently beneath us. "I am sorry, son," my father said finally. "For all of it. For not believing you back then. For lying about your mother. For not being the father you deserved." Unlike my mother's dismissive non-apologies, my father's words carried the weight of genuine remorse. "I know, Dad, and I forgive you." The next morning, I called my therapist in Seattle for an emergency virtual session. Dr. Melissa Chen had been helping me work through my family issues for the past 4 years, and if anyone could provide perspective on this bizarre situation, it was her. "They faked her death, and then asked you for money," she repeated after I explained the situation. "That is certainly a new one in my practice." "What do?" I asked. "Part of me wants to just cut all ties completely. Another part wants to give them the money with strings attached, like requiring a real apology. And a small, petty part wants to expose the whole death deception to everyone back in Pine Creek." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Those are all understandable reactions. But before you decide, ask yourself, what outcome would bring you peace? Not satisfaction or vindication, but genuine peace." I considered her question carefully. I want to be free of this cycle. The guilt, the manipulation, the constant drama. I want to move forward without burning bridges, but also without being vulnerable to more exploitation. "Then I think you know what to do," she said simply. That evening I composed a careful email to my mother and Tyler. "After consideration, I have decided not to invest in Farm Fresh Direct. While I wish you success with your venture, I do not believe a business partnership would be healthy for our already complicated family dynamic. Mom, I am still processing the fact that you allowed me to believe you were dead for 2 years. That deception, combined with the unresolved issues surrounding the charity money accusation, has damaged my ability to trust you in financial or personal matters. Tyler, I hope you find the support you need for your business and your recovery. I believe you have potential when you apply yourself honestly. I am not closing the door on our family relationship entirely, but I am establishing boundaries. Any future relationship must be built on honesty and mutual respect, not obligation or manipulation. I am open to conversation when you are ready to engage on those terms. Magnus." I sent the email and then blocked both their numbers on my phone. Not permanently, but as a temporary measure to give myself space to heal, without immediate pressure for a response. My father supported my decision completely. "It is about time someone in this family stood up to her," he said when I showed him the email. "I spent 35 years trying to keep the peace at my own expense. Do not make the same mistake." A week later, back in Seattle, I received word through my father that Tyler's business had indeed failed. The farmers had organized and pulled out en masse after discovering he had been marking up their products far beyond the agreed percentages. My mother had apparently moved to Florida to live with another relative, distancing herself from the fallout. Rather than feeling vindicated by their failure, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Their problems were no longer my responsibility or concern. I had set a boundary and held it, breaking the dysfunctional pattern that had defined our relationship for decades. In the months that followed, I channeled my energy into positive directions. The experience had given me insight into how small businesses could be vulnerable to financial mismanagement and fraud. I developed a specialty within my consulting firm, focusing on financial security systems for small agricultural businesses and local food networks. The irony of transforming my family trauma into a successful business niche was not lost on me. I also established a small charitable foundation that provided technology education scholarships for young people from rural communities. The first recipient was a promising student from Pine Creek, recommended by Pastor Griffin, who had remained in touch since the truth about the charity money came to light. My relationship with my father continued to strengthen. He eventually moved to a smaller home in a town about 30 minutes from Pine Creek, making a fresh start while remaining close to his lifelong friends. We spoke weekly, and he visited Seattle twice a year. During one visit, he met Diane, who by then had become a significant part of my life. "She is good for you," he observed as we watched her chatting animatedly with a friend across the restaurant. "She sees you for who you really are." "Unlike some people we know," I replied with a small smile. He nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother loved you in her way, Magnus. It was just always conditional, based on what you could do for her or for Tyler. That is not real love. What you have with Diane, what you and I have rebuilt, that is the real thing, accepting people as they are, flaws and all." My mother eventually reached out via email about a year after our Minneapolis encounter. Her message was predictably free of any genuine accountability, focusing instead on her difficult life in Florida and subtle hints about financial struggles. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining the boundaries I had established. Tyler's communication was more sporadic and usually coincided with new business ideas or financial needs. I remained cordial but firm, never shutting the door completely but never opening it wide enough for old patterns to resume. The truth is, forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means releasing yourself from the burden of anger while still protecting yourself from further harm. I had forgiven my mother and brother for their actions, but that did not mean I trusted them or wanted them centrally involved in my life. The family I built in Seattle, Diane, close friends, colleagues, and my father during his visits, became my true support system. These were relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation or manipulation. Through them I learned what healthy love looked like, both giving and receiving it freely, without the constant calculation of family politics. 5 years after discovering my mother's fake death, I received an unexpected letter from her. Inside was a short note that simply said, "I was wrong. I am sorry for what I did to you. No excuses." It was the apology I had waited for but no longer needed to heal. I appreciated it nonetheless, recognizing that it represented growth on her part, however belated. The greatest lesson from this long, painful journey was learning to value myself enough to establish boundaries. The child who had accepted being second best, who had craved approval and acceptance at any cost, had grown into a man who understood his own worth, was not determined by others' perceptions or treatment. That charity drive accusation, as painful as it was, had ultimately forced me out of a toxic family dynamic and into building a life on my own terms. The $50,000 investment request, with all its audacity, had given me the perfect opportunity to finally break free from patterns of guilt and obligation. Today I can look back on it all with a sense of peace rather than anger. I still have moments of sadness for what might have been with a different kind of family, but I no longer yearn for their approval or acceptance. I have found my place in the world, surrounded by people who value honesty, respect boundaries, and love unconditionally. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself when it meant potentially losing relationships you valued? Share your experiences in the 25 comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more authentic stories about family betrayal and finding peace through difficult times. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into.